The air inside Lucille Creole was a warm embrace of buttery tom hum, smoky gumbo, and the faint tang of Creole spices, swirling under the golden glow of crystal chandeliers. Nestled in New Orleans' French Quarter, this upscale gem was a magnet for foodies, its linen-draped tables and jazz saxophone riffs pulling in the city's elite. It was a balmy Friday evening in September, the kind where the Mississippi River breeze carried laughter from Bourbon Street, but inside, the clink of wine glasses and the rustle of silk dresses set a refined tone. Waiters glided like dancers, their trays laden with crawfish étouffée and beignets dusted with powdered sugar, while a trio in the corner spun a sultry rendition of "Summertime." Lucille Creole wasn't just a restaurant, it was a stage, and tonight, it was about to host a drama nobody saw coming. Eli Walker stepped through the heavy oak doors, his charcoal vest crisp against his dark skin, his tie a subtle nod to the city's purple and gold flair. At 35, he was a man of quiet power, his close-cropped beard framing a face that could charm a room or cut through nonsense with a single look. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the dining room, cataloging the polished silverware, the mismatched wine glasses, a quirk he'd note later. Beside him was Nia Walker, 34, her burgundy de Hoy dress hugging her curves, her locks swept into a crown that turned heads. Her smile was warm, but her gaze was razor-edged, missing nothing as she adjusted her clutch, where a notepad hit her critic's pen. Together, they were the Walkers, food critics for Southern Fork magazine, their reviews read by millions, their names a whisper in culinary circles, but tonight, they were anonymous, or so they thought. The hostess, a young woman with a nervous smile, checked their reservation, her voice faltering under the weight of the moment. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, right?" she said, glancing at her tablet. "Table for two, 7 p.m. Eli nodded, his voice smooth, "That's us." But before she could lead them in, a shadow fell over the podium. Paul Grayson, the manager, 50, his slick-back hair and too-tight suit screaming midlife ambition. His blue eyes raked over Eli and Nia, his smile thin, more grimace than greeting. "One moment," he said, his voice clipped, taking the tablet from the hostess, his fingers lingering as if checking for a mistake. Paul's gaze flicked from their polished attire to their faces, a flicker of doubt, or something uglier, crossing his features. The dining room hummed, real cock, Doan Nan in pinstripes, a young couple snapping selfies, an older pair sipping Sazeracs, glancing their way, some curious, others dismissive. Paul cleared his throat, his smile tighter. "I'm afraid there's an issue with your reservation," he said, his tone dripping with false regret. "We're fully booked tonight. Perhaps you meant another spot." Nia's eyebrow arched, her voice honeyed but sharp. "We booked weeks ago, Mr. Grayson. I'm sure you can find our table." Eli's hand brushed hers, a silent signal. They'd played this game before, and they were ready. Paul's lips twitched, his eyes darting to a few empty tables in plain sight, his excuse crumbling before he spoke. "Those are reserved," he said, his voice rising, drawing more eyes. "You'll have to leave." The hostess flinched, her hands twisting, but Eli's smile didn't waver, his voice low, a spark in his eyes. "Oh, we're not going anywhere," he said, patting his vest pocket, where a folded letter from Southern Fork waited. The jazz trio played on, but the room felt still, a storm brewing at Lucille Creole, and Paul was about to learn he'd picked the wrong couple to turn away. The chandeliers of Lucille Creole shimmered, casting a golden glow over the linen-draped tables, where the scent of buttery crawfish étouffée and smoky gumbo hung heavy in the New Orleans air. The jazz trio's saxophone wove a sultry melody, but at the restaurant's entrance, a different kind of heat was rising, one that had nothing to do with the September breeze drifting in from Bourbon Street. Eli and Nia Walker, food critics whose names carried weight in culinary circles, stood poised, their first-class reservation dismissed by manager Paul Grayson, whose slick-back hair and forced smile barely hid his bias. Eli's charcoal vest hugged his frame, his hand grazing the Southern Fork letter tucked in his pocket, a trump card he hadn't played yet. Nia's burgundy dress caught the light, her locks a regal crown, her eyes slicing through Paul's weak excuse, "You'll have to leave," as empty tables in the dining room mocked his claim of a full house. The hostess, Marie, clutched her tablet, her nervous smile gone, while Real Cock whispered, their glances a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Paul had just doubled down on his mistake, and the walkers were ready to flip this script in a way that'd leave the French Quarter buzzing. Paul straightened his ill-fitting suit, his blue eyes narrowing as he faced Eli and Nia, his voice a blend of condescension and authority. "I'm sorry, but our policy is crystal clear," he said, his smile more sneer than apology, loud enough to carry over the jazz trio's notes. "Reservations are verified, and yours doesn't check out. You'll need to step outside." He gestured toward the heavy oak doors, his hand steady but his jaw tight, as if challenging them to resist. Marie, the hostess, gripped her tablet, her eyes darting between Paul and the walkers, her fingers twitching like she wanted to intervene but didn't know how. The dining room's chatter faltered, a dozen pairs of eyes, businessman in a navy suit, a young couple mid-selfie, an older pair sipping Sazeracs, turning to the unfolding drama, some intrigued, others uneasy. Nia's laugh was sharp, a blade cutting through the restaurant's hum. "Doesn't check out," she said, stepping forward, her dress shimmering, her locks swaying as she tilted her head. "We booked this table 3 weeks ago, confirmed by email. So, is your system lying, or are you?" Her voice was smooth but deadly, each word a jab that made Paul's sneer twitch. Eli's hand brushed her arm, his calm tempering her fire, his eyes fixed on Paul, reading every nervous tick. "Let's see that reservation list," Eli said, his tone even, almost professorial, his vest pocket bulging with the letter he wasn't ready to reveal. "If there's a mix-up, we'll clear it right here." Paul's face flushed, his hand waving off the request, his voice climbing to mask his unease. "No need for that," he snapped, shooting a glare at Marie, who shrank under his stare. "My system's fine, and I don't appreciate the attitude. This is a high-end establishment, and we have standards." The word "standards" hit like a brick, loaded with unspoken meaning, and the dining room went quieter, the jazz trio's saxophone stumbling for a beat. The businessman, Mr. Thompson, a gray-haired man in a navy suit, paused mid-bite, his fork hovering, while the young couple lowered their phones, the girl whispering, "Did he just say that?" The older pair exchanged looks, the woman's lips pursing, her Sazerac glass clinking against the table. Nia's eyes blazed, her clutch snapping open as she pulled out her phone, displaying the reservation email with Lucille Creole's logo. "Standards," she said, holding up the screen, her voice a quiet storm. "You mean like honoring confirmed bookings? Or is it something else?" She stepped closer, her locks catching the chandelier's light, her presence commanding the entrance. "Go on, Paul. Tell us what standards we're not meeting." The crowd stirred, Mr. Thompson setting down his fork, his voice low but audible. "That's uncalled for," he muttered, his companion nodding. The young couple's whispers grew, the guy saying, "This is messed up." Marie bit her lip, her hands trembling, her tablet a shield she didn't know how to wield. Paul's sneer faltered, his fingers fumbling with his tie, his voice straining to regain control. "Don't twist my words," he said, his eyes darting to the dining room, sensing the shift in the room's energy. "We're overbooked, plain and simple. You need to leave, or I'll have security escort you out." He nodded toward the bar, where Reggie, a burly man in a black blazer, stood with a crackling radio, his eyes wary but locked on the scene. Eli's smile held firm, his hand brushing Nia's, a silent signal. They'd navigated this kind of nonsense before, and they knew the game. "Escort us?" Eli said, his voice low, almost amused, his pocket still hiding the Southern Fork letter. "You sure you want to go there, Paul? It might not end how you expect." The dining room was a tinderbox now, the jazz trio playing softer, the clink of glasses nearly silent. Tessa, a young waitress with a tight ponytail, paused by the walker's assigned table, her tray of oysters tilting, her jaw tight with unease. She'd seen Paul turn away customers before, always the same kind, always with excuses, and her discomfort was clear, her eyes flicking to Paul with a mix of fear and defiance. Mr. Thompson leaned toward his companion, his voice carrying. "This is ridiculous. They've got a reservation. What's his problem? The young couple, now openly staring, pulled out a notebook, the girl jotting down Paul's name, her voice low. This is going in my Yelp review. The older woman with the Sazerac shook her head, muttering, same old New Orleans nonsense. Nia stood her ground, her phone still raised, the email a glowing accusation. We're not leaving, she said, her voice ringing clear over the jazz. We reserved this table, and we're dining tonight. Call your boss, Paul, or whoever you answer to, because this, she gestured to his stance, his sneer, is gonna cost you more than you realize. Eli stepped up, his vest brushing the podium, his voice steady, a spark in his eyes. You've got one shot to fix this, he said, his hand hovering near his pocket, the letter a quiet ace. Check your list again, or we'll have a different kind of conversation. Paul's face contorted, his tie now crooked, his voice spiking in a desperate bid for dominance. You're causing a scene, he barked, signaling Reggie, who started toward them, his radio crackling, his reluctance plain. Marie gasped, her tablet clattering to the floor, her voice small. Mr. Grayson, please, they're on the list. But Paul ignored her, his eyes blazing, his voice a snarl. Get them out, Reggie, now. The dining room froze, the jazz trio halting mid-note, the saxophone a lonely wail. Mr. Thompson stood, his napkin falling, his voice firm. You're making a mistake, Grayson, he said, his companion nodding. The young couple rose, the girl's voice clear. This is discrimination, straight up. Tessa set her tray down, her ponytail bouncing as she stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. Paul, stop this, she said, her eyes on Eli and Nia. They're customers, same as anyone. I'm not watching this again. Paul's head whipped toward her, his voice a hiss. You're out of line, Tessa. Stay out of it. But Reggie slowed, his radio silent, his eyes shifting to the walkers, sensing a bigger play. Eli's hand grazed his pocket, the letters weighed a promise, his voice low, a smile tugging at his lips. Last chance, Paul, he said, his calm the eye of a hurricane. You don't know who you're dealing with. The restaurant held its breath, the jazz gone, the spices still swirling, and Paul's world was teetering on the edge of collapse. All right, let's dive back into the sizzling drama at Lucille Creole, where the New Orleans night is crackling with more than just Creole spices. The jazz trio's saxophone has gone quiet, the chandeliers casting a tense glow over the linen-draped tables, and the air's thick with the scent of gumbo and indignation. At the entrance, Eli and Nia Walker, food critics with 1 million readers at Southern Fork magazine, are locked in a standoff with manager Paul Grayson, whose bias has turned a simple reservation into a public spectacle. Paul's just called security to escort them out, his slick-back hair and too-tight suit barely hiding his panic as his standards excuse crumbles. Eli's charcoal vest hides a Southern Fork letter, a trump card he's holding close, while Nia's burgundy dress shimmers, her locks a crown, her phone flashing a confirmed reservation email. The dining room's a powder keg, businessman Mr. Thompson's on his feet, the young couple's jotting notes for Yelp, Tessa the waitress is defying Paul, and hostess Marie's tablet lies shattered on the floor. Reggie, the security guard, hesitates, his radio silent, as Paul's authority slips. Eli's warning, you don't know who you're dealing with, hangs like a storm cloud, and the walkers are about to flip this script in a way that'll leave the French Quarter reeling. Reggie's boots scuff the polished floor as he steps closer, his black blazer straining, his eyes flicking between Paul's snarl and the walker's unshaken calm. His radio crackles, but his hand stays off it, his voice low, uncertain. Sir, ma'am, I need you to come with me, he says, his tone more request than command, his gaze lingering on Eli's steady eyes, Nia's raised email. Paul's face twists, his tie askew, his voice a bark. Do your job, Reggie. Get them out. But Eli raises a hand, his vest brushing the podium, his voice smooth, cutting through the dining room's hush. Hold up, Reggie, he says, his smile sharp, his pocket bulging with the letter. Before you move, you might want to ask your boss who he's kicking out. Or better yet, ask Mr. Du Bois. The name, Lucille Creole's owner, lands like a spark, and Paul's eyes widen, his flush deepening, his fingers fumbling with his tie. You don't get to name-drop the owner, he snaps, but his voice cracks, betraying a flicker of doubt. Nia's laugh is a velvet blade, her phone still raised, the email glowing. Name drop, she says, stepping forward, her dress catching the chandelier's light. We don't need to drop names, Paul. We're here on business, and you're about to find out what kind. The dining room stirs, Mr. Thompson's napkin crumpled on his table, his voice low but firm. This is getting out of hand, Grayson, he says, his companion nodding, her wine glass forgotten. The young couple's notebook is open, the girl's pen flying, her voice a whisper. This is going viral on Yelp, for sure. The older woman with the Sazerac leans back, her voice dry. He's digging his own grave. Eli opens his leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with meticulous notes on Lucille Creole's menu from a prior anonymous visit, his voice calm but deliberate, loud enough for the room to hear. Let's talk about your gumbo, he says, flipping a page, his eyes locked on Paul. Rich, but the roux was rushed, too pale for a true Creole base. The crawfish étouffée, over-salted, masking the shrimp sweetness. And don't get me started on the mismatched wine glasses, sloppy for a high-end spot. The crowd gasps, the jazz trio's bassist pausing, his bow hovering. Paul's jaw drops, his hands shaking, his voice a stammer. How do you know that, he says, his eyes darting to the empty tables he claimed were reserved, his lie unraveling. Nia steps up, her clutch snapping open, pulling out a printed review from Southern Fork, her voice a quiet storm. Because we've been here before, Paul, she says, holding up the article, its headline, Creole Dreams, Flawed Execution, Bold and Damning. We wrote this last year, gave you 3 stars, said you had potential. Guess you didn't read it. The dining room erupts in murmurs, Mr. Thompson's eyes widening, his voice carrying. They're the Southern Fork critics. The young couple's gasps, the guy whispering, no way. The older woman chuckles, her Sazerac raised in a mock toast. Well, damn, Grayson's done. Paul's face drains of color, his tie a noose, his voice a desperate squeak. That's not possible, he stammers, backing toward the podium, his eyes flicking to Reggie, pleading for rescue. You're making this up. You're not, but Tessa, the waitress, cuts him off, her ponytail bouncing, her tray abandoned, her voice bold despite her trembling hands. I read that review, she says, stepping forward, her eyes on Eli and Nia. It's them, Paul. I told you to stop turning away customers like this, but you never listen. She turns to Mr. Thompson, her voice steady. He's done it before, to other black folks, always with excuses. I'm sick of it. Reggie's stance shifts, his radio silent, his eyes narrowing at Paul. You sure about this, Mr. Grayson? He asks, his voice low, his reluctance turning to doubt. The crowd's murmurs swell, the young couple standing, the girl's voice clear. He's discriminating, and now he's caught. You gonna let this slide? Mr. Thompson rises, his navy suit crisp, his voice firm. I'm a regular here, and this is unacceptable. Where's Du Bois? The older woman nods, her Sazerac glass clinking. Get the owner out here, now. Paul's panic spikes, his hands flailing, his voice a shout. You're all ganging up on me, he barks, pointing at Tessa, then the walkers, then the crowd. This is my restaurant, and I say who dines here. But his words drown in the crowd's boos, the dining room a chorus of dissent, the jazz trio's drummer shaking his head. Marie, the hostess, steps forward, her voice small but brave, her shattered tablet forgotten. They're on the list, Mr. Grayson, she says, her eyes on Reggie. I checked it myself. You told me to stall them. The oak doors swing open, and a man in his 60s strides in, Mr. Du Bois, Lucille Creole's owner, his white suit impeccable, his salt and pepper beard framing a face that loves food but hates drama. His eyes sweep the scene, Paul's red face, Reggie's hesitation, Tessa's defiance, the walker's calm, the crowd's outrage, and his voice booms, a chef's command. "What in God's name is going on here?" he says, his hands on his hips, his gaze landing on Paul, who shrinks under it. Tessa steps up, her voice clear. "Mr. Dubois, Paul's trying to kick out these customers for no reason," she says, pointing to Eli and Nia. "They're not just anyone, they're critics." Eli pulls the Southern Fork letter from his pocket, holding it up, its embossed logo catching the light, his voice steady, a smile playing at his lips. "Mr. Dubois, I'm Eli Walker, this is Nia Walker," he says, his words a thunderclap. "We're here to review your restaurant for a feature article. Your manager just told us we don't meet his standards. Care to explain?" Nia's eyes lock on Paul, her voice a velvet dagger. "Or maybe Paul can tell you why he's throwing out the critics who could make or break this place." The crowd roars, Mr. Thompson clapping, the young couple cheering, the older woman raising her sazerac. Paul's knees buckle, his voice a whisper. I didn't know," but Dubois's eyes narrow, his face darkening, and the dining room holds its breath, waiting for the hammer to fall. Have you ever been judged unfairly or seen someone face bias head-on? Share your story in the comments, I'm reading every one. Let's dive back into the firestorm at Lucille Creole, where the New Orleans night is hotter than a plate of jambalaya, and the dining room's a battleground of egos and truth. The chandeliers gleam, but the real light's on Eli and Nia Walker, food critics with 1 million readers, standing tall at the entrance, their calm a stark contrast to manager Paul Grayson's unraveling. Paul's slick-back hair is a mess, his too-tight suit a straitjacket as he faces the wrath of owner Mr. Dubois, whose white suit and chef's glare could curdle gumbo. Eli's just dropped the bombshell, he and Nia are Southern Fork critics, here to review the restaurant, holding up a letter with the magazine's logo, while Nia's burgundy dress and locks make her a queen of righteous fury. The crowd's electric, businessman Mr. Thompson's clapping, the young couple's cheering, Tessa the waitress is calling out Paul's bias, and Reggie the security guard stepped back, his radio silent. Paul's stammer, "I didn't know," is drowned by boos, and Dubois's demand for answers has the dining room holding its breath. The jazz trio's gone quiet, the sazeracs are forgotten, and Paul's about to learn the cost of judging the wrong couple. Mr. Dubois's eyes narrow, his salt and pepper beard twitching as he snatches the Southern Fork letter from Eli's hand, his chef's fingers scanning the embossed logo, the date, the signatures. His face darkens, his voice a low growl that cuts through the restaurant's hush. "You're telling me," he says, turning to Paul, "that you tried to kick out the critics writing our feature article? The ones who could put us on the map, or bury us?" Paul's knees wobble, his tie a noose, his voice a desperate squeak. "Mr. Dubois, I thought they weren't, they didn't look," but Dubois cuts him off, his hand slashing the air, his voice booming. "Didn't look what, Paul? Like they belong? Like they could afford this place? Say it." The dining room erupts, Mr. Thompson slamming his napkin down, his voice sharp. "That's exactly what he meant." The young couple stands, the girl's notebook raised, her voice clear. "He's been shady this whole time." The older woman with the sazerac chuckles, her glass glinting, her voice dry. "Boys cooked, and it ain't the gumbo." Tessa, her ponytail bouncing, steps closer, her tray long abandoned, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "He's done this before, Mr. Dubois," she says, her eyes blazing. "I've seen him turn away black customers, make excuses, lie about reservations. I told him to stop, but he threatened my job." Reggie, the security guard, nods, his radio still silent, his voice low. "I saw it too, sir. He pushed this hard." Paul's face crumples, his hands flailing, his voice a whine. "They're lying. I was protecting the restaurant, following protocol." But Nia's laugh is a velvet dagger, her clutch open, pulling out a dog-eared copy of Southern Fork with their byline, Eli and Nia Walker, critics at large. Protocol, she says, holding it up, her locks catching the light. Your protocol's prejudice, Paul. We've reviewed Michelin-starred spots from Miami to Chicago, and we've never been treated like this. You're not protecting Lucille Creole, you're poisoning it. She reads a line from their last review, her voice clear, damning, true hospitality welcomes all, bias starves the soul. Guess which one you're serving tonight? Eli steps forward, his vest crisp, his notebook open, his voice a steady drumbeat. We came to give this place a fair shot, he says, his eyes sweeping from Paul to Du Bois, then the crowd. But your manager decided we didn't belong before we sat down. Now, Mr. Du Bois, you've got a choice, back him, or back your restaurant's future. He flips a page, reading a note from their prior visit, his tone cutting. The beignets were soggy, the service rushed, but we saw potential. Tonight, we saw your true colors, and they're not Creole. The crowd gasps, Mr. Thompson's companion clapping, the young couple's cheers rising, the older woman raising her Sazerac in salute. Du Bois's face is thunder, his white suit a stark contrast to his fury, his voice a chef's roar. Paul, you're done, he says, pointing to the back office, his beard trembling. You're fired, effective now. Get out. Paul staggers, his hands clutching the podium, his voice a broken plea. Mr. Du Bois, please, I didn't know. I was just, but Du Bois's glare silences him, his hand waving Reggie over. Escort him out, he says, his tone final. Reggie nods, his reluctance gone, his hand guiding Paul toward the back, the manager's boots dragging, his career a smoldering ruin. The crowd cheers, the young girl shouting, good riddance. Mr. Thompson's voice booms, about time. Du Bois turns to Eli and Nia, his face softening, his voice thick with regret. Mr. Walker, Mrs. Walker, I'm deeply sorry, he says, his hands open, a chef begging for a second course. Lucille Creole is my heart, my soul. I didn't know Paul was doing this. Please, stay, dine, let me make this right. The dining room watches, the jazz trio poised, the air heavy with anticipation. Nia's eyes meet Eli's, a silent conference, their years of partnership speaking volumes. Eli nods, his voice steady, but firm. We'll stay, he says, tucking the letter back into his pocket, but not just for dinner. You'll make this right for every customer who's been turned away like us. Nia steps up, her dress a beacon, her voice clear, addressing Du Bois and the crowd. We're writing this feature, she says, her clutch snapping shut, her lock swaying. And it's not just about your gumbo, it's about your values. Host a charity night, open your doors to the community, show New Orleans what Creole hospitality really means. Do that, and we'll give you a fair review. The crowd roars, Mr. Thompson raising his glass, the young couple clapping, the older woman's voice cutting through. That's how you do it. Tessa's eyes shine, her voice soft. I'll help make it happen, Mr. Du Bois. Marie, the hostess, picks up her broken tablet, her voice brave. Me too. Du Bois nods, his white suit gleaming, his voice a vow. You have my word, he says, his hand over his heart. Creole Unity Night, next month, for the community, with your input. Paul's gone, and this won't happen again. He gestures to the best table, center room, his eyes pleading. Please, dine with us tonight, as my guests. Eli and Nia exchange a look, their mission clear, their dignity unbroken. We'll dine, Eli says, his notebook closing, his smile sharp. But the review's still coming, and it'll tell the truth. The crowd cheers, the jazz trio strikes up a lively riff, the dining room alive again, but Paul's shadow lingers, a warning of what bias costs. The walkers take their seats, the crowd settling, Tessa rushing to serve them, her smile genuine. Mr. Thompson sends over a bottle of wine, the young couple snaps a discreet photo, not for social media, but for their journal, a story to tell. The older woman toasts them, her Sazerac raised, her voice warm. "Y'all did good," she says, and the dining room hums, the spices swirling. Lucille Creole changed forever. But the real storm's brewing in the Walkers' pens, and Paul's regret is just the appetizer. Alright, let's wrap up this delicious drama at Lucille Creole, where the New Orleans night has served up a heaping plate of justice alongside the gumbo. The chandeliers still glow, the jazz trio's back to spinning sultry tunes, and the air's rich with Creole spices, but the real flavor is the triumph of Eli and Nia Walker, Southern Fork food critics who turned manager Paul Grayson's bias into a career-ending misstep. Paul's gone, fired on the spot by owner Mr. Du Bois, his slick back hair and smug excuses of fading memory as he was escorted out. Eli and Nia are seated at the best table, their charcoal vest and burgundy dress a quiet power, their pens poised to write a review that'll shake the culinary world. The crowd, businessman Mr. Thompson, the young couple, the Sazerac-sipping older woman, waitress Tessa, and hostess Marie, is buzzing, their cheers lingering as Du Bois promised a Creole Unity night to redeem his restaurant. The Walker's Southern Fork letter, once a hidden ace, now sits folded, their truth laid bare. This isn't just a dinner, it's a reckoning, and the story's about to ripple far beyond the French Quarter. By Monday, Lucille Creole's drama is the talk of New Orleans, not through viral videos or hashtags, but through the city's heartbeat, word of mouth and ink on paper. The Southern Fork feature, The Bitter Taste of Bias, hits newsstands, Eli and Nia's byline blazing, their review a scalpel dissecting Paul's prejudice while praising Du Bois's crawfish étouffée and Tessa's grit. The article's a sensation, quoted in Eater, Bon Appetit, and the Times-Picayune, its sharp prose, a restaurant's soul is in its welcome, and Lucille Creole nearly lost its own, sparking debates at oyster bars and beignet stands. Readers flood Southern Fork's letters page, sharing stories of bias in dining, turning the Walker's stand into a movement. Paul's name becomes a cautionary tale, his firing a headline, his attempts to land another job fizzling as the industry shuns him, his standards excuse now a punchline. Du Bois keeps his word, hosting Creole Unity Night a month later, transforming Lucille Creole into a community hub. The event's a sellout, tables packed with locals, black, white, Creole, Cajun, sharing gumbo and stories, the jazz trio joined by a second-line band, the proceeds funding a culinary school for young chefs of color. Tessa, promoted to assistant manager, runs the night with a smile, her ponytail gone for a sleek bob, her defiance now a badge. Marie, the hostess, greets every guest, her confidence blooming, her broken tablet replaced by a newfound voice. Mr. Thompson, a regular, brings his firm staff, their applause for Eli and Nia a toast to change. The young couple, now food bloggers, write a glowing review, their Yelp post calling Unity Night a taste of what New Orleans can be. The older woman, a retired chef, shares her own bias battles, her Sazerac raised to the Walker's courage. Eli and Nia, seated at the event's head table, launch a scholarship fund with Southern Fork's backing, named Table for All, to train chefs from marginalized communities. Their speech, Eli's steady baritone, Nia's fiery grace, moves the crowd, their words a call to make every kitchen a place of welcome. The fund's first recipient, a young black chef from Treem, trains under Du Bois, her shrimp Creole a hit at Unity Night. The Times-Picayune covers the event, its photos of Eli and Nia with Du Bois and Tessa splashed across the food section, a beacon for restaurants nationwide. Culinary schools add the Walker's article to their ethics courses, and Bon Appetit invites them to guest edit a diversity issue, cementing their legacy. Back at Lucille Creole, the gumbo's richer, the beignet crisper, the wine glasses matched, but the real change is the vibe, open, warm, Creole in soul. Du Bois hires a diverse staff, trains them on inclusion, and keeps Unity Night an annual tradition, each year bigger, drawing foodies from Atlanta to Houston. Eli and Nia return, their reviews now glowing, their table always reserved, their names whispered with respect. They dine quietly, pens ready, knowing their words shape more than menus, they shape hearts. This is what happens when you judge the wrong couple, when truth and grit outshine bias. Eli and Nia didn't just write a review, they rewrote a restaurant, a city, an industry. So, what about you? Have you faced prejudice or seen someone rise above it? Share your story in the comments, I'm reading every one. If the Walkers fight fired you up, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Let's keep cooking a world where every table's open, and every voice is savored.